At this moment, Dalton has boarded the plane back to the capital. This trip to Longhu Mountain has many twists and turns. From the martial arts competition to the invasion of the Pantheon gods, the process can be considered highly risky, but fortunately, everything turned out fine. He won the championship in the martial arts competition, and also obtained 3 dragon source energy. In the end, he destroyed the conspiracy of the Pantheon gods. Everything was almost perfect, so after saying goodbye to his new friends, Dalton accompanied Margaret on the return flight. 4 of the 5 dragon source energy have been gathered, and only the last one is missing. According to Margaret's news, this last dragon source energy has been found, and this person has it is in the capital. As for who it is, it has not been investigated yet. However, according to Margaret's guess, it is likely related to the 3 princes. The position of the crown prince is undecided, and the minds of the 3 princes are very active. Whoever can get the dragon source energy will have good luck and have a better chance to compete for the position of the royal heir. Of course, Dalton was not sad about these things. What he cared about most was the rumor. If he could gather 5 strands of dragon source energy, he would have a great chance to rush into the Supreme Land Fairyland. For a warrior, this is the biggest goal in life. Dalton was naturally no exception. In the afternoon, the plane landed. After a brief farewell to Margaret, Dalton took a car to Chenfei Group. Chenfei Group was created by Natasha, and Dalton also invested in it, which was a witness to their love. Since coming to the capital, he and Natasha have been apart for a long time and rarely see each other. The main trouble is that there are too many troubles. Since entering the capital to investigate the truth, it has been troublesome all the way. After experiencing Lauren's betrayal, Baye's sacrifice, the turmoil in the Longhu Mountain, and the hardships of finding the dragon source energy. In fact, his heart has long been exhausted. After leaving Longhu Mountain, he was eager to go home, and the person he wanted to see most was Natasha. In his heart, Natasha is his warm harbor. As long as he is with her, all his worries will disappear. He will only show his weak side in front of Natasha. At this moment, in the office of the chairman of Chenfei Group, Natasha is wearing a capable professional suit, with long hair casually tied behind her head, revealing a delicate and perfect face. She is quietly looking at the documents in her hands, concentrating and serious, and she is so beautiful. Even the beautiful female assistant standing next to her couldn't help but stare at her for a while. The female assistant was carefully selected, with outstanding appearance, figure, temperament, and ability. If she were put outside, she would be a goddess. But compared with Natasha, she pales in comparison. In fact, in the female assistant's heart, Natasha has become her idol. She couldn't imagine what kind of excellent man could be worthy of such a perfect woman as her own president. The plan is good, just implement it as it is. After reading the document carefully, Natasha nodded with satisfaction. In addition, notify the people below to rest when they need to rest, and to know how to balance work and rest. Although there are bonuses for overtime, don't work too hard. It's not worth it to ruin your body. The female assistant stared at Natasha's beauty in a daze, and she was a little bit stunned. Huh? What's wrong? Is there a problem? Seeing that the people around her didn't respond, Natasha looked up. The female assistant woke up from a dream, swallowed her saliva, shook her head repeatedly, and her cheeks blushed. No problem. There was no way. Natasha was too beautiful, and she couldn't help herself. Of course, her orientation was normal at the beginning, but after staying with Natasha for a long time, she was not sure. Are you worried about something? If you need to rest, I can give you a few days off, Natasha said lightly. Sorry, Ms. Natasha, I was a little distracted just now. The female assistant was a little embarrassed. Well, you go and get busy first. Natasha didn't bother. After signaling the female assistant to leave, she began to bury her head in work again. The development of Chenfei Group is getting more and more prosperous, and the business can be said to be endless. However, the more it is at this moment, the more she needs to be cautious and can't make any mistakes. It is not easy for women to start a business, especially in the capital, which is surrounded by wolves. Although many people are very friendly for the sake of her grandfather, she knows in her heart that the capital will soon be in a big turmoil. Once the new king ascends the throne, her grandfather will soon lose power, and the situation will be completely different at that time. So she needs to grow and expand her network within a limited time, so that she can win a place in the capital, which is in a precarious situation. Just as the female assistant turned around and prepared to go out, she was suddenly slightly startled. She saw a tall and handsome man slowly walked in. The man has sword eyebrows and star eyes, excellent temperament, and a strong and not thin body that is just right. The kind of person who is impressive at first sight. At this moment, the man was holding a bouquet of flowers in his hand. After looking at the female assistant, he put his bony index finger to his mouth and made a gesture of silence. Then, with a smirk, he quietly walked in front of Natasha. The female assistant looked at him quietly with some doubts, and even forgot to remind him. What else? When the figure approached, Natasha raised her head with a sense of something. Before she could see the situation clearly, a bouquet of flowers had been delivered to her. Smelling the rich fragrance, Natasha frowned, then took a closer look and was stunned for a moment. She suspected that she had seen it wrong, rubbed her eyes, and looked up again. The face of the person in front of her was still so clear, the person she had been thinking about day and night. Husband! You are finally back! Natasha stood up with tears in her eyes, plunged into Dalton's arms, and hugged him tightly, fearing that the person in front of her would suddenly disappear. During the time when Dalton was away, Natasha was worried about him and kept an eye on his news. But even if she missed him, she did not take the initiative to disturb Dalton, because she did not want him to be distracted by her and affect national affairs. She understood Dalton's business very well, so she kept suppressing her inner throbbing and used busy work to distract her attention. However, now, when Natasha really saw Dalton, her long-suppressed feelings finally broke out. Months of lovesickness turned into tenderness, and tears could not help but burst out. This scene shocked the female assistant next to her. She didn't expect that her beautiful CEO had already been taken. She also didn't expect that Natasha, who was vigorous and resolute in the past and full of queen temperament, would become so gentle in front of the man in front of her. She began to look at Dalton carefully. In terms of appearance and temperament, there is really nothing to say. He is outstanding in the entertainment industry. But the problem is that Natasha has countless suitors, including the chairman of a large company, the legitimate son of a wealthy family, and even some top figures in high positions. These people's figures and appearances, including their family backgrounds, are almost impeccable. However, Natasha has never given a good face. So she was very curious about who Dalton was, and how he could make such a beautiful woman like Natasha fall in love with him. Okay, don't cry, I'm back. Look at you, your face is all red from crying. Dalton lowered his head, held Natasha's face with both hands, and carefully wiped away the tears. The two looked at each other with deep affection. Natasha slightly raised her feet, and her red lips were directly imprinted on Dalton's lips, giving him a passionate kiss. These made Dalton unable to handle it. His cheeks were slightly red, but he did not avoid it. After kissing for a long time, Natasha moved away contentedly, her sparkling eyes staring straight at her lover, her tone carrying a bit of resentment. Humph! You still remember to come back after disappearing for so long? I thought you forgot me. How is that possible? Even if I forget anyone else, I will never forget you. Look, as soon as I returned to Capital, I came to find you first. Dalton smiled. Really? Natasha looked suspicious. Of course, I can swear. Dalton raised 3 fingers. Humph! That's about right. Natasha smiled with satisfaction. As long as the person in front of her has her in his heart, she is more satisfied than anything else. I haven't seen you for a while. You seem to have become thinner. It must be very hard outside, right? Natasha held Dalton's slightly thin face, looking a little distressed. It's a bit hard, but it's all over. I will stay in Capital to accompany you for a long time in the future. Dalton said. Keep your word, you can't regret it. Natasha's eyes lit up. If you don't believe me, let's make a pinky promise. Dalton raised his little finger and moved it. Childish! Natasha rolled her eyes. But she still happily stretched out her little finger and hooked it tightly with Dalton. Looking at the two people's affectionate appearance, the female assistant next to her smiled sweetly. Although she was really touched, this was much more interesting than falling in love. Lena, don't be stunned. Hurry up and pour tea for Mr. Reese. Natasha winked at the female assistant. Oh, okay. The female assistant woke up as if from a dream and hurriedly said goodbye and left. It's almost time for dinner. Come to my house for dinner today. My grandparents want to meet you, Natasha said with a smile. Ah? So soon? I'm not prepared at all. Dalton was inexplicably nervous. It looked like he was going to meet her grandparents today. It's just a home-cooked meal. Don't be nervous. Although my grandpa is in a high position, he is very kind and never puts on airs. Just relax, Natasha comforted. She just thought Dalton was in awe of the majesty of Duke DUCAN. After all, there were only a handful of people in Capital who could surpass her grandpa. Well, let's go out and buy some gifts. What do your grandparents like? Dalton asked. No need. We are all family. Why should we be so polite? Natasha shook her head. It's the first time I visit someone's house. How can I go there empty-handed? There must be a gift. Otherwise, it would be too ignorant of the rules. I also hope to leave a good impression in front of your grandparents. Dalton insisted. That's right. Natasha nodded. Then I will go out with you to pick out some exquisite gifts. You don't work anymore? Dalton glanced at the documents on the table. How can work be as important as you? Let's go! Natasha smiled sweetly, then took Dalton's arm with one hand and held flowers in the other. In the shocked eyes of all the employees of the company, she walked out of Chenfei Group step by step. After leaving the Chenfei Group, Dalton and Natasha first went to the mall and bought a lot of gifts, from the octogenarians to the toddlers. All the relatives of the Chen family. They had everything they should have. Later, the two went to an antique shop and picked out a nice calligraphy and painting for Duke DUCAN. At dusk, Dalton, who had prepared everything, visited the Duke DUCAN's mansion for the first time. The Duke DUCAN's mansion is located in the central area of the inner city of Capital. It is in the form of a quadrangle and covers a large area. Duke DUCAN of Chen family has 3 sons and 1 daughter. The eldest son, Kirin Chen, serves in the court and holds a third-rank official position with a high status. The second son, Gavin Chen, is engaged in the pharmaceutical industry and is worth tens of billions. He is a famous entrepreneur in Capital. The third son, Xavier Chen, is doing well in the army and is now a third-rank general. The youngest daughter, Jessica Chen, who is the mother of Natasha, is extremely favored in the entire Chen family. Natasha also became the apple of the Chen family's eye. She was the kind of person who was afraid of dropping her when she was in her hands and melting when she was in her mouth. The rapid rise of Natasha's Chenfei Group was inseparable from the help of her grandfather and 3 uncles. So after hearing that Natasha was going to bring her fiancé home, the entire Chen family attached great importance to it and made sufficient preparations early. Grandpa DUCAN Chen rushed home as soon as possible, and the 3 uncles even turned down their work at hand and planned to check it carefully. So when Dalton stepped into the living room, he was really shocked by the scene in front of him. In the living room, dozens of people were sitting in a crowd, for generations were living together, and basically everyone who could come had already arrived, especially those pairs of hot eyes, which made Dalton feel uncomfortable. Didn't you say you were going to have a simple meal? Why is it so grand? Dalton cast an inquiring look at Natasha next to him, and the latter winked playfully, revealing an innocent look. This is Natasha's fiancé? He is indeed a handsome man. He has a good appearance, but I don't know how capable he is. Don't be a useless pretty boy. Don't worry, Natasha has good taste. After all, she doesn't even take Mark Montgomery, a gifted child, seriously. Everyone looked at Dalton carefully, and couldn't help whispering, "Ahem!" DUCAN coughed twice, and the surroundings became quiet instantly. It is very impolite to discuss with distinguished guests in person. Dalton, this is my grandpa, this is my grandma, this is my uncle, second uncle, third uncle, first aunt, second aunt, third aunt, and my cousins. Natasha smiled and introduced her relatives one by one. Dalton also greeted them politely. Grandpa, this is Dalton I mentioned to you. You met him before, Natasha said again. Not bad, a very energetic young man. Duke DUCAN nodded with satisfaction. He has already asked someone to investigate the information about Dalton. Dalton is a genius in both martial art and medical, worthy of his granddaughter. As for his specific identity, it is quite mysterious. With his connections, he can't find it out in a short time. But the more this is the case, the more it proves that the other party is extraordinary. Grandpa, this is your first visit, And Dalton has specially prepared gifts for you, Natasha said, waving her hand, and soon several servants came in with large and small bags. Then, Natasha took Dalton and began to distribute gifts from big to small. Fortunately, the two were well prepared. After dozens of gifts were distributed, there were still some left. Of course, the remaining gifts were not taken back and all given to several cute little kids. Hey! Come on, why do you send so many gifts? You are so polite! Yes, Mr. Reese, we will be a family in the future, so there is no need to be so polite. Come on, don't stand, sit down! The three uncles were very enthusiastic. After pulling Dalton to sit down, they began to ask about his well-being and ask all kinds of questions. How old are you this year? What's your occupation? Where are your parents from? The three of them talked one after another, their curiosity overflowing. Dalton smiled and responded one by one. Looking at the three uncles who were gossiping all the time, Natasha was very helpless. They just met and they were checking the household registration here? Is it polite? Seeing that the three uncles were endless, Natasha could only wink and ask for help from her grandfather. Okay, all of you say less. It's almost time for dinner. Let's eat first and chat while eating. As soon as DUCAN spoke, the three people finally quieted down. Then, a group of people walked into the restaurant in a mighty manner. Such a grand scene usually only happens during the New Year and other festivals, but today is obviously an exception. In the restaurant, the two large round tables were almost full of people. Dalton, the distinguished guest, was arranged next to DUCAN and sat in the guest of honor seat. Just as everyone was preparing to eat, the housekeeper of the Chen mansion suddenly hurried in and came to DUCAN to report. Master, Mark Montgomery from the Montgomery Palace is here to visit. Mark Montgomery? What is he doing here? Uncle DUCAN Chen frowned. Last time, the Montgomery Palace said that it wanted to form an alliance with our Chen family. Could this kid be here to propose marriage today? Uncle Gavin Chen asked suspiciously. Humph! A playboy wants to marry the daughter of our Chen family. He is dreaming, Uncle Xavier Chen said coldly. It is obvious that the three of them did not have a good impression of Mark Montgomery. It is true that Mark Montgomery is one of the 4 young masters of capital. He is extremely outstanding in all aspects, and is the dream object of countless women, but they really dare not compliment the other party's character. Dad, what do you think? DUCAN Chen turned his eyes and looked at DUCAN. When we have guests, we naturally cannot lose our manners and invite them to the living room to discuss. DUCAN said lightly. Mark Montgomery represents the Montgomery Palace. No matter what the other party is thinking, he cannot turn him away. As for the so-called marriage, it needs to be considered carefully. Yes. The housekeeper responded and left quickly. You continue to eat. I'll go meet the people in the Montgomery Palace. After saying hello, DUCAN got up and left. The three brothers DUCAN Chen looked at each other and followed him without any prior agreement. They wanted to see what the Montgomery Palace was up to. Okay, they can handle it. Let's eat ours. Old Mrs. Chen smiled and said, motioning everyone to continue eating. 3 minutes later, in the Chen family's living room, Old Man DUCAN was in the first seat at the main entrance, and the 3 brothers of the Chen family sat on the left, in order from oldest to youngest. At this time, the housekeeper led a few people and walked into the living room quickly. The leader was a young man with a handsome face, excellent temperament, and a pair of bright eyes, which sometimes showed a gleam of light. This man was Mark Montgomery, one of the 4 princes of capital, known as the Jade-Faced God of War. Behind Mark Montgomery, there was also a white-haired old man and 2 strong middle-aged men. The white-haired old man was about the same age as DUCAN. Although his face was haggard, he was full of energy. When he walked, he took a square step and put his hands behind his back, which was quite domineering. The old man was Wayne Montgomery, the uncle of Lord Eugene Montgomery and the grandfather of Mark Montgomery. In the entire Montgomery Palace, Wayne Montgomery had a very high status, and almost no one dared to provoke him. Even Lord Eugene Montgomery had to show respect when he saw him. As for the 2 middle-aged strong men behind Wayne Montgomery, they were guests of the Montgomery Palace, masters, and their status was also good. But here, they can only act as bodyguards. Junior Mark Montgomery, meet Duke Chen, meet the 3 uncles. After entering the door, Mark Montgomery bowed politely. He was smiling and graceful, and he looked very likable at first glance. Why didn't you inform us in advance that you are a distinguished guest so that we can prepare early? DUCAN smiled faintly. It is really a bit abrupt for me to come here without permission. I hope Duke Chen will forgive me. Mark Montgomery bowed again. He naturally understood the meaning of DUCAN's words, and he did not pretend to be stupid, but apologized very frankly. This attitude surprised the three brothers of the Chen family. Based on their understanding of Mark Montgomery, he is a person who looks down on others. He is young, in a high position, and has a large army under his command. He is very arrogant. When he came to visit today, he did not show his former edge at all. Has he become mature and restrained? General Montgomery is visiting the Chen family. I wonder if you have any advice? DUCAN got straight to the point. Before explaining the purpose of your visit, let me introduce you first. Mark Montgomery moved aside and then extended his hand to the white-haired old man Wayne Montgomery. This is my grandfather. He is highly respected in the Montgomery Palace, but he usually stays at home and rarely shows up, so it's the Master Montgomery. I have heard of your name for a long time. DUCAN stood up and clasped his fists. He had naturally heard of the name of Wayne Montgomery, the third master of the Montgomery family. Although he is not as famous as his two brothers, he also has a heavy weight in the Montgomery Palace. It's been a long time since I last saw Duke Chen. He is still strong and healthy. Today, I see that he is indeed worthy of his reputation. Wayne Montgomery returned the greeting politely, but there was no smile on his face, and he looked quite stiff. In fact, in his heart, he didn't take DUCAN seriously at all. Looking at the whole of capital, the Montgomery Palace is the supreme existence second only to the imperial power. Among the four royal families, the Chen family, the Spanner family, and the Bryant family all have to stand behind. Especially the Chen family, the weakest force among the four royal families, is a world away from the Montgomery Palace. Although DUCAN is in a high position, in his opinion, he is just a dying old man who will not live for many years. Once DUCAN dies, the Chen family will be in a lack of successors and will become even weaker. At that time, they will not even be qualified to carry shoes for the Montgomery Palace. Third Master Montgomery, thank you for your compliment. DUCAN could naturally see Wayne Montgomery's cold attitude, and said with a fake smile, General Montgomery invited Third Master Montgomery this time. I guess there must be something important. Duke Chen has a keen eye. I admire you. Mark Montgomery first flattered, and then said, This time I came on behalf of the Montgomery Palace, mainly to discuss marriage with the Chen family. Marriage? DUCAN raised his eyebrows, but did not continue. Yes, marriage. Mark Montgomery smiled and said, Throughout the ages, marriage has always been the best choice to enhance the relationship between the two families and maintain power. The Montgomery Palace and the Chen family are both one of the four major royal families. If our two families can have a marriage, they will develop even stronger in the future. Is this your idea, or your Lord Montgomery's idea? DUCAN asked tentatively. Marriage between royal families is not a trivial matter. If it is a collateral branch, it is fine. But if it is a direct line marriage, it is easy to cause the royal family to be jealous. As the saying goes, if a person's achievements are too great, they will overshadow their master. Once the royal families unite and work together, they may threaten the imperial power. In this regard, the four royal families and the royal family have maintained the same tacit understanding. From the beginning to the end, no one has crossed this red line. And today, Mark Montgomery secretly came to the door, obviously to climb up on the red line. So he has to figure out, is it Mark Montgomery who is determined to do it? Or is Eugene Montgomery ambitious?
And just can't accept it. This can't be the end yet. You promised to never leave, and now you're gone. Can't believe I can feel the world slipping away as you slowly fade from my everyday. You promised forever a love without end, but now I'm left broken, struggling to mend. I thought we were so tied, destined for a lifetime, love with no end, love with no end. Staying in my imagination, memories grace. But now there's just an empty space, and I'm lost in this endless chase. Keeping you in my heart, a piece of you I'll never let go. Though distance brings separation, in my heart you'll always glow. I just can't